Your hot date locks the door, lifts up her skirt, and surprises you with her hefty eggplant. Oh no, you had no idea. What will you ever do? This is a reoccurring theme in a good portion of trans erotic fantasies. The imaginary premise wherein we surprise unsuspecting suitors with our secret, which somehow immediately escalates into sex. You might as well buy a lottery ticket at this point, as such fantasies could not be any further removed from reality. Though there certainly are trans women who go on dates without first disclosing that they're trans, it rarely plays out the way the trans surprise fantasy so thirstfully wanted to. In reality, the process of us disclosing that we are trans is quite a complicated matter, with many factors for us to weigh about where, when, and who we'd choose to or feel safe enough to share such intimate details about ourselves. And that is, should we be so fortunate enough to have the option in the first place. Passing, when used amongst trans girls, is an evaluation of how much a trans woman reads as a cis woman. I personally find the term a little off-putting, as it implies that trans women need to aspire towards being cis women, when truthfully, some of the most enlightening and exciting aspects of my life would vanish overnight if I were simply born a cis girl. However, not publicly being read as trans does give us the comfort and peace of mind to experience normal, everyday social interactions, as people would in average cis-heteronorm societies. Cis-heteronorm, or cis heterosexual normality, describes social situations wherein cis and heterosexuality are assumed to be the norm, basically most places. When we do get publicly read as trans, people tend to get pretty awkward about it, whether out of mere curiosity, benevolence, malice, ignorance, erotic interest, sexual anxiety, sense of wonder, or even for sake of virtual signaling. Us being trans suddenly becomes a big deal for many, as if they've never come into any meaningful contact with a trans person before, which unironically can very well be the case for most people. Therefore, passing for trans girls is functionally more a matter of social blending than it is being perceived as a cis woman. When we live seamlessly in cis-heteronorm societies, some of us might call it going stealth. In other words, in places where no one knows we're trans and we have no intention of letting them know otherwise. Thus, those of us who can social blend well into the fabric of civilizations often can enjoy the tranquility of ordinary social interactions, sense of community and belonging, with maybe a few hiccups here and there by random instigators. In not so progressive regions in the world, social blending might be the only real means of us avoiding discrimination, violence, prosecution, or even death. Needless to say, disclosing that we are trans is something that is quite personal to us and should be entirely left up to our discretion. After all, it's no one's business but ours. However, when it comes to the topic of dating, suddenly the issue of disclosing being trans becomes much more contentious. I have a handful of friends who go on dates without first disclosing that they are trans. It's not that common a practice amongst trans girls, but when it's done, it's only done when on dates with men. I don't think I've ever heard of a trans woman going on a sapphic date, as in with other women or femmes, and have a need not to disclose. This differentiation is likely due to the rigid standards cis-heteronorm society places on men's sexuality, which in turn shapes their perception of us to be either archaic or self-conflicting, often making their reaction to us unpredictable. Therefore, some of us are less inclined to be so forthcoming about being trans when dating men, to sort of test out the waters first and screen out who we might suspect would be nutcases. Remember, disclosing always comes at a cost for us. So we really need to feel safe and not disclose without reason. You might ask at this point, why don't trans women just date men from the trans dating pool? There's definitely no shortage of men on trans dating sites, for example, seeking to specifically date trans women. Short answer, the trans dating pool experience can be unpleasant for us. While there certainly are plenty of quality suitors looking in the trans dating scene, they are unfortunately overshadowed by hordes of selfish, low effort, pushy people desperate to get an ounce of trans sex, often offering no romance, no courtship, no chivalry, no sense of building attraction, intrigue, or any form of connection, leaving nothing for us to get excited over. This is a reason why you'd be hard pressed to find trans women on trans dating sites. When we date from the cis-heteronorm dating pool, we get to experience an actual normal date, which not only excites us, but is also quite an affirming experience for most of us. If the trans dating pool didn't make us feel so cheap, we'd probably not have a need to defer to cis-heteronorm dating in the first place, nor shoulder the weight and uncertainty of having not to disclose to our dates, especially with impending intimacy. That's the cis-heteronorm fear, isn't it? That we would somehow trick unsuspecting men into sex. Paradoxically, this tricked into sex theme is also at the heart of the trans surprise fantasy, which many have of us, really polarizing the way that we are viewed. On one hand, as creatures at peak of sexual fantasy, and on the other hand, with great stigma, and sometimes both simultaneously, leaving us no room to realistically experience a sense of normalcy when it comes to dating. It's either sex, 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 please, 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 or oh no, cooties, in a sense. While it would be nice for me to be idealistic here and say that trans women draw the line of disclosure before sex, I do know of trans girls who've had sex without their suitors ever being the wiser. Not many, very few. Which at that point, does it really make any difference? While I personally don't condone sex without disclosing, I do, however, understand the position. At the end of the day, we all just want to be loved, like any human being would, like you. That need to connect is so fundamentally primal that some trans girls even risk putting themselves in potential violence or even getting murdered in pursuit of it. And sadly, some have been. I can almost guarantee that the day the world starts viewing us with general normalcy will also be the day that we will no longer have a need to withhold disclosing being trans. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more, like and subscribe. I am Lilith Bahlour, and these have been some of my musings.